Please rise and join in the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Meeting of the Wahoo City Council, Tuesday, February 14th, 7 o'clock p.m. Open Meetings Act is posted on the wall. There's more information up at City Hall. If you need that, I'll call the meeting to order and ask for roll call.
Stuart Creechy.
Here.
Shane Sweet.
Here.
Carl Warford.
Here.
Ryan Ideas.
Here.
Chris Rappel.
Here.
Patrick Nagel.
Here.
Thank you. There's no proclamations. Any comments from the audience on items that are not on the agenda? Seeing nobody standing or coming forward, so we'll move forward. Department head report is in your packet. Joe is not here to present. Are you going to present?
There's just a couple things I want to touch
Okay,
on.
yeah. He couldn't be here tonight, last minute.
So I got a call today at about 5:30 from Joe. He had gone home. He wasn't feeling well, and I told him to stay home, don't come here. So.
That's okay, we'll give you ready.
With regards to his report, I believe he's planning to come to the next meeting to report to you, but he and I have been working, and this is included in the budget, asking for approval to spend about $25,000 to purchase an asphalt roller. I think he's spoken with you in the past about wanting to do more of removal of asphalt in locations to help preserve the longevity of the asphalt in certain locations instead of using the cold patch. And so it is in the budget. We do have equipment for that in the budget. So that's something we will likely be moving forward unless any of you have any real issues with moving forward on that.
Do it.
At the last council meeting, we did discuss the potential for the Rural Workforce Housing Grant Program, and you had asked for me to dig into the communities that currently are participating that through SEND, and so I did find some information. If you remember, this would be a group of 5 communities within SEND's boundaries that would collectively apply for rural workforce housing grant funds. Our commitment would be $200,000 of cash that would go into the kitty, and then the board making the decisions about how that money and the grant money, if we were successful, would be spent, would be made by the 5 communities together. So the communities that are already doing this, they applied in 2018, are Fairbury, Deschler, Geneva, Beatrice, and Auburn. And so I reached out to some of them. I don't know, this is the packet of information that any application would have to submit. You can pass that around. It's a pretty complete packet for a project. It would give, if we were to participate and we were to be successful in the grant application, each community would have about $370,000 to use, and it is intended to be set up as a revolving loan. So you find a project, you apply to this 5-party board, they review the applications, the project gets approved or disapproved or whatever, and then the project moves forward, and it then repays to the fund. So the idea is that this pot of money keeps building. Since 2018, when these 5 communities came together, they have completed 14 projects, 2 in Beatrice, 7 in Geneva, 1 in Deschler, 2 in Peru, 1 in Seward, and 1 in Blue Springs. 4 of them were new construction, 10 of them were rehab projects. I spoke with the representative from Geneva as well as Auburn, who is participating in it but has not had any projects. So they have money in the till or in the pot but haven't gotten any real project success in their community yet. Beatrice specifically said they put in $127,000 And their comment was that the two individuals that applied for this, the developers that applied for this funds, did not have a long enough track record to get financing from a typical bank. And so without the fund, the projects would not have happened. Kyle from Geneva also said that with having 7 projects, they're primarily the rehab projects. In their community, they had housing stock that was available to rehab. And so I think that is really the question here is, do we have $200,000 to commit to this, and would we be able to find successful projects? And there is a short turnaround on this decision, so.
How short?
Very short.
Okay. March?
Like the next meeting.
Okay.
So if you feel like there's interest,
If there's money in a pool and it's not used or it's not applied for, it just sits there, or is there a time frame before?
I don't know that there is, I was not able to get that
Okay.
answer from any
Okay.
of them. I'm sure there has to be some sort of exit strategy, because you have these 5 communities that, from a city standpoint, we can't put money in the till and not
Right.
figure out how we're gonna get it
I guess
back,
that was my
right?
question.
So
Sure.
I'm sure that there is an exit strategy. I don't know exactly what that is.
Some of those communities are fairly like-sized, so that's good.
Yeah, and if you remember-
Outliers, maybe Deschler, they're quite a bit smaller than the rest.
This is
And Beatrice the other direction.
workforce housing, and so there are some limits to the size of the projects that, I don't have that directly in front of me, but I think it's a single-family dwelling, the project limitation, total project cost is $365,000, and a rental is $250,000 per unit. So going through these project lists,
200 per unit for rentals?
$250.
Okay. Shows 200 on the front of the 7-page or package.
Anyway, that's something, I guess if we're gonna need to get our group together quickly, if that's something you think there'd be interest in participating in.
Now, you said their decision needs to be made by the next meeting, which would be the 28th. So would how we were gonna fund $200,000 need to be figured out by then?
Yes. We would need to issue a letter of commitment, and then, the representative from SEND that I talked to said we would have to deposit the money into the fund by the 15th of May, roughly. The other thing that I wanted to talk to you about is, and I'll kind of just read this memo that I put together, but as you're aware, we have an interlocal agreement with the Wahoo Rural Fire District for our volunteer fire department to provide fire protection services for the citizens located within their district. This was adopted in September of 2019, and it continues until September 1st of 2024. Over the past few months, I've become aware of a communication breakdown between the Rural Fire District and the City Fire Department. Because resolution of any issues between the two parties was of concern at the time of the writing of the agreement in 2019, there was a specific section included in that agreement to address that. And it specifically says that should the district have concerns with respect to either the services rendered by the city or the application of any terms of this agreement, then a representative of the district shall contact the city administrator to address the same. If the matter is not resolved to the satisfaction of the district, then the district president will name 2 elected officials of the district to serve on a joint subcommittee and to address the issues at that time. Similarly, the city administrator will name 2 elected officials of the city who will serve on the aforementioned joint subcommittee. The city administrator may participate in all subcommittee meetings as an ex officio non-voting member. So reports to me from the mayor, the fire chief, and others suggest that there's an issue that must be resolved for a successful relationship to be restored. However, as the writing of this memo, I have not received any communication from the representative of the district notifying me of any issue. I cannot address them if I don't know about them. Therefore, in the interest of reaching resolution, 2 elected officials of the city should be named to serve on the described joint subcommittee. Because I understand there's an aversion by the rural board representatives to communicate directly with me, I will defer that selection of elected officials to the mayor. I would like to continue to be able to have the option of participating in that subcommittee, but I will leave it up to you to determine who those two representatives should be.
Okay, well, you probably know that in the last 6 months, we've met with them twice. It basically gets down to communication. But there's been other issues they bring up, and if we had communication, we wouldn't have those issues. One of them dealt with grants. One time, one of the rural board directors said, well, you apply for the money, and when you get it, we'll come up with something to spend. That's not the way it works. When you submit the grant for the grant, you identify the equipment that you want to purchase. If it's granted, then we are supposed to work together and write checks for those items. So I don't know if we got that resolved or not, but Stuart and I were contacted last fall by the two evidently designated by the rural board, and we met again in February. So dealing with this document, everybody get a copy of section 5. I visited a little bit one of our meetings, and I think the best way to improve the communication, Stuart and I can go a certain, but then when they throw stuff out, we're not there every day. You, the two of you, Carl and Chris, you are involved. And so that's the two that I would like to appoint to this subcommittee. We still want that information to come to City Hall, and if you feel it should come to Melissa and she get the information out, or if it's best to have them communicate direct with you. They're not communicating with us now. So this would be because they are not following the rules of this document. We're choosing a different group, and I feel they need to be reaching out to the 2 or 3 of you every time there's a meeting. We need to know when they're meeting. It would also be nice if they maybe would meet at the fire hall if their main purpose is equipment, so that could be discussed that way in that setting. So those are things that as an amendment would be, not an amendment, but would be rewriting this because they're not communicating with people that they should be. And I agree that Melissa should be kept in the loop on this. I followed up a little bit, and I've learned this from other areas. Evidently, the rural fire boards are supposed to have it published in the local paper or on their website. I have seen no evidence of that, so they might have been in violation all along. But Senator Dorn from Adams has introduced a bill, LB 47, that would not require rural fire to publish in the local paper.
Their meeting notice, right? Is that
The
what you-
meeting notice, yeah. Because, I'll just say not everybody reads it. And a weekly paper, it just doesn't work. But now I found out the other day that the NRD lobbying are asking for the same thing for the NRDs. So it's kind of a momentum thing that moving away from using the paper. They had their hearing on January, I think it was 26th or 27th. A lot of people supported it. The only ones opposed to it was the Press Association. They'll lose some revenue off of that. But it came out of committee 8-0. And so it has been moved to the floor and will be debated by the entire body. So that's kind of where we're at. Probably the things that they're going to struggle with is notifying the city of their meetings. And we can't operate without them communicating. We know that there's a communication gap between our chief and rural board. Evidently, there is with Melissa. So what I'd like to do is appoint the two, put the terms in there of having to notify by email the city when their meetings are held and where they're held. They might be in violation on another side because the bill says it has to be, the notices have to be in a conspicuous place. You go out to Bob's Medna's building, there's a sign that they put up there, Rural Fire Board, but right beside it says private property. So you can't go in there unless you're a fire board member, if that's your issue. The other's Carmel Grain. The third place they have been posting is Baumgar's. If you go to the back of Baumgar's, where the two restrooms are, there's a board in between the two doors that they post on. To me, that's not, a lot of people post in the banks or fire hall, different places. So I don't know if we'll gain on that or not. But this agreement goes through the end of September of '24. And so if we still having issues, we'll still work on sitting down with them again. But hopefully this is a step in the right direction. So I'll open it up. We can't take any action tonight, but I'm asking for action, at least an okay for us to write this up, rewrite part of this, and put in some stipulations on notification of meetings, run it past the law firm, and go from there.
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in on the committee, and if there's communication error or issue there, I'd happy to be the point person. I know that, like you said, there's some friction there between the board and the fire chief right now, so if I can be of assistance in that category where they just contact me and I can help facilitate between the city, the fire department, and the rural board, I'm happy to do that. So
I just want to reiterate that I also would be willing
Absolutely.
to do
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
I just don't get any.
Get the calls.
I don't even-
Right.
They're not going that route.
I agree. There needs to be a lot more communication between what's going on over there and the actual fire department that uses the funds and equipment that they purchase. There should be, a better way to communicate between the two, so I'd love to be part of that.
Because I think at the end of the day, everyone has the same goal. You want to
Right.
serve the constituency the best way that
Yeah.
they can be served.
So what would be,
Okay?
Yeah, I'm happy to help out whoever I can, yes.
Okay.
so we would come up with some amendment then to the agreement? That would be the
It's an
process?
amendment form, or the first part being they're not following the document because they're not reaching out, city administrator. They picked the two of us, and we've tried to.
We've listened,
It
yeah.
hasn't worked.
Yeah.
At the last meeting, we started talking about this a little bit, and I asked Bob Sabatka, I said, I'm assuming the two of you will be the two that are appointed. And he said, well, I'll have to take it back to the board. Okay, then maybe they have to officially appoint him. So, and then the meeting notification. There might be other things we can do to put some pressure on that as far as conspicuous places.
Well, I'm curious, as we mentioned, that if we feel this isn't being followed now, and we change it and say they need to start notifying us, of meetings and whatnot, and it continues to not be followed at that point, what are we doing about that?
Do-
What can be done about that?
Do we need to amend the agreement? Because I feel like it lays out
Yeah,
that
this
is
part of
to
it,
create hopefully get to a resolution. And if we could get to a resolution, maybe we don't need
yeah.
any amendment.
I think the only amendment would be, and maybe it's part of that better communication, would be, because it doesn't state in there that they have to notify the city when there's a meeting. That maybe is the only thing. And if they fight that, we got big problems. So, everybody understand what we're gonna be shooting for?
Yep.
Okay. You got everything covered you want?
Yeah, I'm just waiting until we get to.
You're waiting for
Yeah.
that. Okay, the next item is the consent agenda. Pretty straightforward. A couple people to approve for the rural fire, or for volunteer fire, not necessarily rural. Any questions on the consent agenda? No.
Motion to approve this consent
Second.
agenda?
Stuart? Any questions? Roll call on the consent agenda.
Warford,
Yes.
Creachy,
Yes.
Sweet,
Yes.
Ideas.
Yes.
Rappel,
Yes.
Nagel.
Yes.
Thank you. There's no public hearings tonight, old and tabled business, there's none to act on. Items not requiring action, Melissa has prepared information, dealing with ATVs, UTVs, golf carts within city limits, and no action will be taken tonight. She's got some data.
Yeah, so I don't know, Jerry, if you want to scoot around so you can see what I've put together.
It's a very short cord.
Okay.
You got a short fuse? No, you don't have.
So I just wanted to, you had questions about, I'm sure some of this you guys already know, but it's just good to lay the foundation. You would think that Nebraska statutes would be pretty straightforward in regard to regulation of this, but they were adopted in pieces, and so there's several differences that I kind of want to review with you. So ATVs by statute are motorized off-highway vehicles, 50 inches or less, 1,200 pounds or less, travel on 3 wheels, designated for the operator only unless they've specifically been designed by the manufacturer for more, and they cannot be modified, retrofitted with aftermarket parts to be eligible for use under any of the rules that the city may adopt, and that's straight out of statute. UTVs are motorized off-highway vehicles, 74 inches in width, not more than 180 inches in length, 2,000 pounds or less. They travel on 4 wheels, and they also cannot be modified or retrofitted with aftermarket parts to be eligible for use under any of these the rules that we may adopt. Golf carts are known as low-speed vehicles, and they are a 4-wheeled vehicle that can attain a speed of more than 20 miles an hour in 1 mile, but not more than 25 miles an hour on a paved level surface. Weigh 3,000 pounds, and they have to comply with the federal motor vehicle safety standards. Or they have 3 wheels and equipped with a windshield and occupant protection system, and again, have to comply with federal motor vehicle safety standards. So you can see how there's all of these different speed limits and sizes and such. So do we have the authority to regulate them? Yes, we do. That's the short answer. ATVs and UTVs are lumped together. It can be outside of corporate limits for ag purposes, which we don't really care how those are used. But we do have the authority to adopt an ordinance to regulate how they're used within city limits. So the state law requirements for operating ATVs and UTVs within city limits, they can only operate between sunrise and sunset. For ATVs and UTVs, you must have a valid Class O operator's license or a farm permit. You have to be less than 30 miles an hour. You have to have liability insurance. That's not clearly defined. You have to have headlights and taillights, and you have to have the bicycle safety flag as described there. You have to have good brake system. You have to have adequate muffler system with no aftermarket altercation or modifications, and you have to have a spark arrestor. I'm not quite sure what that is, but it's in statute. Okay. The penalty is spelled out in statute also. For the first violation is a Class 3 misdemeanor. Subsequent after that is Class 2 misdemeanor if it's within 1 year, and then any other penalty provisions of the rules of the road, like if you're a DUI or you ran a stop sign, those penalties all apply as well. Then do we have the authority to regulate golf car vehicles? That's what they call them. Yes, we do, and there's 2 instances. If it's adjacent or contiguous to a golf course, or if it's within corporate limits. Those are the 2 obviously it's within the corporate limits, the one that we're looking at. So their regulations are a little different. They can only operate between sunrise and sunset. You have to have a Class O operator's license. Farm permit is excluded from that. On streets with a posted speed limit of 35 miles per hour or less, there's no limit on where those ATVs and UTVs can operate, except for if it's a state highway. But specifically, golf carts are allowed where there's a posted speed limit of 35 miles an hour or less. And they have to be operated less than 20 miles per hour. And there are some specific liability insurance requirements that are listed. There is no requirement for lights or safety flags. So you can kind of see how they're sort of all over the place. Our current ordinance that we have does not address golf carts. It doesn't say anything about those kinds of vehicles. It doesn't allow ATV or UTV uses except that are listed on the next slide. It does provide for operating requirements, equipment requirements. There are limitations that are spelled out in statute that are similar for both golf carts or golf cars and ATVs, UTVs. And ours provides penalty for violations. These are the exceptions. We allow city employees to use it when operating on behalf of the city or a contractor that we've hired. Parades, those are pretty much allowed by statute for even without us having an ordinance. And then there's snow removal that we allow for, or a public emergency. In 2018, when we talked about this, if you remember, for those of you that were on the council, we had a previous ordinance in place talking about a UTV. It was sort of specific to one individual that used it to deliver newspapers, and that was not legal, so we needed to make some changes, and that's how the ordinance came about. There were safety concerns expressed and presented by the EMS department and the police department. And there was also conversation about the additional regulations that the staff would be required to enforce if we allowed them in, allowed the ordinance for everyone to operate those. Can you go back one?
Yes.
So what have other communities done? I know there's a lot of communities across the state that have adopted these and allowed them. It's pretty much, the statute gives us the ability to place any additional restrictions on it as long as we have the limits, the minimums that are spelled out in statute. So some communities have over 18, over 19, over 21. Some of them require helmets, require them to use seat belts. They've established limits for the types of insurance that are required. Some of them have limited speed limits. Blair has a requirement that if you're having a child in your ATV or UTV that must be restrained in a regular vehicle, they have to use a child restraint in this situation as well. Have rear view mirrors or a roll bar. There's one that I saw, cannot operate on any public land that's not a road, street, highway, or alley. So, for instance, if it's sunset and you're past the time that you can operate, you can't hop up on the street right away and head on home. Some of them have a strict revocation of the right to have the permit when the rules are violated. And there was one community that had even a stricter policy when their violation included alcohol use. Significant fines for violations. There was one that specifically said that's not allowed on school property. So the process then is, if you decide you want to move forward to this, we would create an application form. The inspection would be completed by a designated department, probably the police department. The fee would be paid at City Hall once that inspection is done. Those fees ranged from nothing to $100 that I could find. And then a sticker is issued that has to be displayed on, statute doesn't talk about where, but most communities had it listed as on the rear bumper. Go ahead. There was a bill in the legislature last year that Senator Slama introduced that had to do with the way allowing ATVs, UTVs on county roads. And there's some, I can get you this link. that talks about the crash history. If you go to the next one. But this is the calculations, and this came from the Nebraska Safety Office. An ATV crash is 13 times as likely to be fatal compared to a typical motor vehicle crash. And a car ATV crash is 23 times as likely to be fatal compared to a car crash. So there's lots of information out there talking about the safety. And so I think if you go to the next one. Our current ordinance on operations says must be 18 years of age, you have to wear seat belts or wear a helmet, and then all other state law requirements. And then on violations, this is where our ordinance kind of steps up the game. For first offense, it's revoking, and this is how the ordinance is written. For 1 year from the date of offense, the vehicle's impounded until validly registered, or for 14 days, whichever is less. Charged with a class 3 misdemeanor with a max fine of $500 and or 3 months in jail, or both. The second offense, if that occurs within 10 years of the first offense, the privilege of having this permit is revoked for 5 years, and there's a max fine of $1,000 or 6 months in jail, or both. So we are one of the communities that, for what we have stepped up the game. Now, you look like you have a question.
Yeah, that's only for, I mean, and you're talking about as a current ordinance, that's,
Right.
again, do we even have, we have a permitting process right now then for people who are using it for snow? or
No, we don't
parades?
have, there's nothing in the ordinance that talks about permitting. If we were going to move forward with this, we would have to do something.
Okay.
I see your
So
question,
that's-
right.
You're saying this is what they had proposed previously? This isn't the ordinance we have
This is
currently
what
in
is
place?
written in the ordinance, so
So we have an ordinance that allows for violation of something that isn't allowed to begin with?
that we,
Because
Well,
it used to be, right?
the only ones that are allowed are those that are used for
Snow
snow
removal.
removal and city,
Okay.
So right now, if somebody is driving an ATV or UTV in town, period, this would be the violation potentially.
Well, I saw the
Because,
validly
because
registered,
there's
I'm
no
trying to figure out.
there's a violation.
yeah,
for
that's,
driving now.
I
I was trying to
had,
figure out how they can be validly registered if we have no registration process
That,
right now.
that makes
Right.
it hard.
So
Yes,
that
I
needs to be
agree,
cleaned up
yes.
at some,
right.
either way.
They didn't
Okay.
get by with it.
Okay, that's it. So I think you have two questions. The first is this something we want? Actually, there's three questions. Is this something we want? Do we want to allow ATVs and UTVs and golf carts, or one's group and not the other? Those are the questions. And then if you decide that that's something that you want to do, what are the additional regulations that you want to put in place? Do you want to be, yeah, you saw all of the examples that other communities, and it's really sort of all over the place. It's, I emailed Seward because I couldn't find what they charge. They charge nothing for a permit. There's other places that charge $100 a year for a permit, so.
Okay.
Any questions? I can email this out to you so that you have that information at your fingertips.
What
for
does our
conversation.
chief of police think of this?
We did not talk about it specifically in the staff meeting. I assured them that if you guys got to the conversation where you want to move forward, they would be given the opportunity to provide their input or their thoughts on specifically the safety side of it and the impacts it may have to their departments, so.
So what's the next step in terms of moving this forward then?
I guess I would think the next step would be to put it on the agenda as maybe an action item where that you guys make the decision whether you want to move forward or not. That gives the staff the opportunity to present their information about safety, their safety concerns or implementation issues they see. And then at that point, you could direct the staff to draft an ordinance. This will, if it's something you want to move forward, I foresee it might take a few meetings to get all of the issues worked out, but
Well, I do think we want to move forward. I think you can make a case that you would have UTVs separate from golf carts, but we don't have to. You've almost got two different animals there, but
I
that
guess
might come up.
to me, for enforcement, it'd be nice to have the same set of rules apply to all, right?
Right.
Right.
No matter what, so if one is, if state law forbids golf carts from going over 20, I would say our rules would probably be then none of the vehicles are allowed over 20, just for an enforcement standpoint. You wouldn't want an officer sitting back and trying to decide,
Is
is
that a
that one a
golf cart
UTV
or
or a
a
golf
Right.
cart?
Right.
Oh, I didn't know that. I thought we all could go certain.
I think for simplicity, that would be easier, because then as people register it, they get their set of rules and what they can and can't do. But I agree completely. I would like to see it on the agenda and start working through it.
Absolutely.
So then on the next agenda, we would put under the action items, the determination for you guys to decide whether you want to move forward, but the staff have the opportunity to express their concerns with actually
Yeah.
doing so.
Discussion and
And
possible action.
enforcement, you know.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. The question was asked earlier before some of you came. We're probably looking at early summer, maybe before we get it completed and.
The last time around, it took a while, and we went down some avenues that I didn't expect.
Yeah,
So it'll take longer than you think.
okay. Action items not requiring a public hearing. Chestnut Street Improvement Project. A is approval of change order number 18 and final in the amount of $0. Can you speak to that?
Sure
Okay.
can. My name is Tyler Hebel with JEO Consulting Group. I have a little additional information I'd like to share with each council member that I'd like to review as we talk about these three items that are on the agenda.
I've got one.
Yeah, the street,
He's got it.
street committee has them, so.
I've got one already.
Okay, just let me know, and I'll keep,
Yeah.
there's a handful more here, so the three items that are on this agenda tonight are basically to wrap up the lighting portion of the project along Chestnut Street, which is the last open contract that you have with Collins to wrap up that overall project. However, the information I've just handed you, I want to review very briefly, is that last fall, we had a light pole break. And there was obviously some concerns around that, so I wanted to walk through that just real briefly on why that's maybe not a concern and how I feel comfortable with that. Just briefly, and I will not go every word, but back in September, the light pole broke. That's on the northern part of the project. It broke while the subcontractor actually had a hold of it with the skid steer. They were working to plumb it to get it straight, and it broke. It was noticed at that time when it broke, there's a couple holes in the bottom part of the pole that allows for conduit entry into the pole to allow the conductors to get up to the light. It was noticed that those entry points were directly across from each other, which was kind of a little bit of a surprise. They were supposed to be offset. As you'll see in the information I keep providing here, the plans showed them at 6 inches elevation-wise different from each other, however still 180 degrees to each other. This raised some concern with not only ourselves, but also with city staff, like what's going on here? At that point, I investigated the broken pole that was down in the city yard. There's a couple things that came apparent to me that said, this just something's not adding up right. Luckily, the city ordered extra poles for inventory purposes, which was wise of Melissa and Ryan's part. And I went and inspected the brand new poles, still bundled. And let me remind, just a note, the city ordered all the poles, so that was not a contractor-provided item. That was a city-purchased item. And they all came in the same time for the entire Chestnut Street project. But what I noticed is I actually unbundled some of the brand new poles. The holes for the conduit entries were exactly the same elevation, basically 180 degrees from each other. They were not offset like we were thought they would be. Also, there was a little bit of information as I uncovered this brand new pole that kind of caught my attention. Is the size of the hole. The size of the hole on the brand new ones was 1 7/8 inches in diameter, which is what we anticipated per the plans and the shop drawings that when the poles were purchased. However, I had noticed when I had looked at the broken pole, the hole looked a lot larger and actually measured a little larger, but understandably, this pole had just broken, so it wasn't a real clear circle, I guess you could say. Caused enough concern in my mind that I asked the city permission to excavate on each side of a handful of poles along the northern part of the project to basically field measure the exact hole diameter in the installed poles. And what we did is we dug down the sides of 5 poles from 14th Street North, and that's really the poles we're really watching or kind of concerned with, is the ones 14th Street North. That's a separate contract. Group G is what it was. We excavated them with the assistance of the line crew. They sent out a person and some equipment to help us. And what we noticed when we excavated them is that all the holes were 2 3/8 in diameter, which again kind of raised our concerns, like, ooh, what's going on here? So from that information, our first thought is we want to make sure these poles are safe before we take any further steps. JEO hired a third-party structural engineering firm, Structural Design Group out of Lincoln, to basically provide an analysis of the as-manufactured poles, which came with 2 1 7/8 holes, versus the now installed poles in the contractor modified pole with 2 2 3/8 holes in them. And basically what we wanted to know is that, first off, are they safe? And number 2, with the change that the subcontractor made, did they make any significant structural changes that we should be concerned about the pole? Long and short of it, and I'm keeping moving right along the last last page, the structural engineer issued some analysis and findings that says that the poles are safe. They meet code and they are safe. So with that information, we've come back to, particularly Melissa and Ryan have assisted us in the communication through this process. We've come back to the table and basically said, we've got to handle a few things to wrap up this contract. First off, we've got a pole that's broke. It needs to be replaced. And when they modified the holes, what it did do is it did void the manufacturer's warranty on the coating only. The coating system was only for 5 years, and it was from the date of receipt of the poles. So we really only have about a year or so, 2 years worth of coating warranty left. So what I made a suggestion to Melissa and Ryan and the contractor was, in the last page of my little presentation here, is that I think to just kind of cover that gap of where that warranty is maybe voided and where our typical 1-year warranty may run out before you would have expended your full 5 years. I've requested a maintenance bond from the contractor for the light poles. I know maintenance bonds aren't super common, at least we don't deal with them a lot here in the city of Wahoo, but it is a common document that we do utilize in other communities, and really what I would say it equates to is kind of an extended warranty. You have a 1-year warranty from the date of acceptance of the substantial completion, which is on your agenda today, which has been very typical to most JEO projects and many consultants projects that you work with. However, I wanted just a little extra assurance. So what we've requested is a 3-year maintenance bond. So the first year's kind of doubled up, if you can imagine. There's a warranty that's already required per contract, but then there'd be additional 2 years. And I felt like that was at least a little bit of comfort to know that if we would have something really concerning coming out of those poles in the next few years, we've got a document here and a connection back to the contractor to make sure we get them taken care of. We've had this conversation internally with Melissa, myself, and Ryan, but we've also brought the contractor in and had a couple of conversations with him. The general contractor, which is M.E. Collins, I've requested them to provide the maintenance bond. They're the one that have had the contract with the city of Wahoo. Through some negotiations, we've got that accomplished, I think. And I think it's a fair deal. Basically, they're covering, even though the city purchased the poles, they're covering above and beyond their contract amount in regards to what it took to install the poles and go from there. What we're not including in the maintenance bond is the actual conduit and the conductors. That's not of question here. The of question component is the pole itself, and just making sure we feel comfortable with it. If the coating would happen to some reason start to disintegrate a little bit more or some reason, these are aluminum poles, so I'm not overly concerned about your typical rust types of items, and these things are below grade, etc. They are a direct buried pole. So to me, it's just an additional level of comfort, a little additional warranty, I guess you could say, to get beyond that 1-year period. in the end, the poles are still safe. They are meeting code. The additional diameter in the entry points doesn't significantly change the strength of the pole. I think that was the biggest thing I wanted to learn out of this as we went through this process. So with that being said, we wanted to present this information. I also feel that it's appropriate at this time to go ahead and close out that contract. And on your agenda are 3 items. There's a change order, number 18, for $0. And what that is, it's adding the maintenance bond language into the contract. Because the maintenance bond was never part of the original contract. But I want to add that in, so it's all part of the contract. So what we've asked the contractor to do is to provide that at his cost, but I want it to contractually be bound to the project. So the change order is adding the requirements for the maintenance bond into the contract at $0. Then the pay application was just the remaining funds that are owed to the contractor. And then the third document is the substantial completion for only Group G. You folks have already accepted all the other portions of that project. The only outstanding portion is Group G, which is the lighting from 14th Street North. And so with the acceptance of the substantial completion tonight, if so approved, that would start your basically 1-year warranty period on basically everything that's associated with that part of the project for 1 year, which is pretty standard to any of our contracts. So that's a lot of information in a nutshell, but I have met with Street Committee a week or so ago. Those 3 gentlemen are up to speed with it. We went into a little bit more discussion, but at this time I would offer if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
When you were excavating and looking at the existing poles, did you notice any stress on those poles? And have we ever had any other pole break?
No, there's been no other poles that have broke, and I didn't visibly see any other stress.
And the concern with creating an oversized hold for the conduit to go through, the metal itself wasn't finished after that was done because it's aluminum. So there's not a concern there with having that treated.
No, really not. I mean, the coating is more aesthetics in this application.
Gotcha.
We don't want silver. Well, it was not the desire to have silver poles in this application, so
Right,
they're
black.
black. Yeah.
And it's also below grade, so it's not a visible thing.
Yeah. And the difference, again, I'm getting into the weeds, but the difference between 14th Street North and South, in the south portion of this project, which was obviously occurred a couple of years ago, the conductors for that portion of the lighting project were different. They were not in conduit. They were direct bury cables because the spacing of the services and everything on this, I guess, 14th Street South was a lot closer. Up north, we stopped having as many service connections, so we start having some really long runs. Our conductor sizes got a little bit bigger. We went away from the direct bury to a conduit. The conduit was larger than the direct bury. Nonetheless, there was no communication from the subcontractor that he enlarged these holes, so there's a gap and an issue there. But in the end, I feel very comfortable with the poles where they're at today.
So in your opinion, and I'm not going to write it down, but what is the lifespan of these light poles that we're working with? And that's a hard one to guess, but it's going to be around for a while.
Oh, certainly.
Okay.
And to your point though, I want to bring up is the maintenance bond, covers your normal, I guess the things that we're talking about here tonight. If there's truly a failure, not due to acts of God, or somebody hitting it in an unfortunate accident, or a mower hitting it during mowing operations. There's all those kinds of scenarios that we can't hardly warranty for. Those are, I think we have to understand that. Now, acts of God, they are designed to handle the wind load and the ice and that kind of stuff. But when we get a tornado, those are different scenarios, things like that. So we need to be mindful of those differences. Any questions?
It's a good explanation.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, we would appreciate moving forward on those documents if you're comfortable with them. I've given the originals to Christina for execution if they're so approved this evening.
Thank you.
You bet.
So basically, we talked about A, any questions on approval of the order, change order 18 with no dollars involved.
Or do you want separate approvals, or you want to make an approval of
Yeah.
change order A?
I'll second it.
18.
18, whatever.
Eighteen.
Line eight.
Okay, yeah, okay.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any other questions? from the council?
So that gives us the maintenance contract. At some
Yes.
point, I'm assuming as we're agreeing to all this, though, we're also accepting that the holes being cut wrong is acceptable and the city is then accepting responsibility for that in the long haul.
Yeah, there are.
5 years from now, we
There are.
have, 5 years from now, we have a little wind and ice and one of those does end up snapping off, that's on us.
It's on us. Yeah, they're ours.
And a little bit on the structural engineer, who said they were safe.
I get that they said they're safe, but if they said they should be cut this way to keep things safe, and they're cut differently.
Well, the original
I gotta
holes,
take an engineer's
but
word for it.
Valmont cuts the original holes and the original poles that are down in the yard, and they're straight across. And so Valmont actually manufactured them incorrect. But once we accepted them, they became ours. If it would have been caught before we accepted them, we could have sent them all back and Valmont would have had to make all new ones.
Gotcha. Okay.
You ready to vote? Roll call.
Creachy,
Yes.
Nagel,
Yes.
Raffle,
Yes.
Ideas,
Yes.
Warford,
Yes.
Sweet.
Yes.
Okay, approval of final pay application number 34 and final in the amount of $120,828.93.
This is the retainage.
So this is retainage?
I believe so.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Okay. Any other questions? Change order 34. Roll call.
Pay out, 34.
Yeah.
Creachy,
Yes.
Ideas.
Yes.
Warford,
Yes.
Raffle,
Yes.
Nagel.
Yes.
Sweet.
Yes.
C would be final acceptance of the project, authorizing the mayor to sign certificate of substantial completion.
Motion. Yeah, second.
Make it difficult
Yeah.
today.
Yeah, I have it.
Okay, questions? Roll call.
Ideas.
Yes.
Creachy.
Yes.
Sweet,
Yes.
Nagel.
Yes.
Raffle.
Yes.
Warford.
Yes.
Number 2, approval of authorization for the mayor and city administrator to assign amendment to City of Wahoo retirement plan documents, providing for a change in eligibility for participation. Well,
Just keep it real simple. Our current plan documents require someone be age 21 before they're eligible to participate. This amendment would make that eligibility age 19. We have young individuals on board that want to participate, and I think every investment advisor says the earlier the better, right?
I didn't know there was a minimum.
Yeah. So that's all this plan amendment would do, is change the eligibility age.
Is there a reason we need a minimum? There couldn't be a full-time
Yeah.
lifeguard who's
I don't
16
know
years
whether
old and
there's a-
participating?
What about a 16-year-old? You're gonna hire an
Is there a-
M?
I think there might be an IRS, because there is a tax,
A minor?
tax
18.
contribution.
I can see 18, not 19.
Yeah.
But 19 is age of majority in Nebraska.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, I think you have to be 19 and sign
And
the
the,
contract, so,
yeah, the employees'
just like a bank loan.
share is withheld pre-tax.
Okay.
Yeah.
So moved.
So moved.
I'll second it.
Chris?
Yeah.
Any other questions? Approval of the change in eligibility for participation in the retirement plan. All those in favor, roll call.
Warford,
Aye.
Raffle,
Yes.
Nagel.
Yes.
Ideas.
Yeah.
Sweet,
Yes.
Creachy.
Yes.
About stumbled there.
All those in favor?
Got it. Approval of satellite location for Four Sons Keno to operate at Title's Lounge and Sports Bar at 128 West Fifth Street, Wahoo.
I was approached from Jason from Titles about a year ago, actually, and we've just been in negotiations about this, and we're looking to add a second location. We're previously at the Wheelhouse, and looking to add a second location for them at Titles. We just need your approval so we can move forward with licensing. Just the approval of the sales outlet agreement that we have between the two of us and with the city.
Okay, any questions?
You'd run them both. Same
Yes,
time? Okay,
yes.
it's not one or the other.
No, it'd
It's
be,
both.
yeah, it would be beneficial to the city, to us, and to titles to be able to make a little bit extra money too.
Absolutely.
But yes, the city would still get their percentage from both locations, so.
And it is the same game at both.
Say it is exact, yes,
It's simultaneously the same game, right?
yes, more or less. Well, yes. Because, I mean, it's two different computers, so that, I mean, that's a great question, because, no, it's the same game, but it's two different ball draws. Because it's still a random number
random-
generator.
Two separate random number generators.
Yes.
Right.
Yes, I mean, it's,
Unique to each location.
yes.
So it's
Yes,
not-
it will not actually be a satellite, it'll be its own location, but it's still the city of Wahoo's game.
Okay. I
But
gotcha.
per the charitable gaming rules, it is called a satellite location, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
that's what Kerry would call it, yes.
Cool. Good.
Okay. Action?
Move to approve?
Second?
Second.
Okay, approval of Four Sons Keno to operate a titles and sports bar.
Thank you, guys.
Any other questions? Roll call.
Warford.
Yes.
Sweet.
Yes.
Nagel.
Yes.
Ideas.
Yes.
Creachy.
Yes.
Raffin.
Yes.
Number
Good luck to
4,
you.
approval of second and possible waiver of third reading on ordinance number 2417, a conditional use permit for the Saunders County to construction of the radio tower at 433 North Chestnut. We were short one council member last time and thought maybe just wait until this one.
Or also to give
Public
the
change.
public, if anybody that lived nearby wanted to say something,
Has there been any feedback?
any feedback to the city.
I have not received any, and this was reviewed by legal, so.
Yeah.
Okay.
And this is turning a 60-foot tower at the courthouse to a 120-foot tower?
Yes.
Yes.
A 60-foot lattice communication tower to a 120-foot mono tower.
For the new radio system.
Was it 120 or was it, yeah, that's right, because
It's
the fall
120.
zone,
The fall
okay, I
zone was
remember talking
90,
about it, the
yeah.
fall zone was 90.
Yeah.
That's
There's
right.
90 to the.
That's why we want to give the
closest
public a chance to
property.
make some comments.
Yep.
And the conditions, if you recall Joven talking about, because this is not in compliance with our tower regulations, there's a statement in the conditions that, of the ordinance that essentially the county will give us a letter saying they would take on the liability.
Right.
Because we're allowing something that's not per our regulations, they're willing to accept the liability.
Give us a hold
for that.
harmless or something.
Right.
Okay. So motion to.
You wanna waive?
Make a motion to waive the third reading. and-
Second that.
And make a motion for the second reading if you got it, count the
There's
numbers.
been a motion and a
Approval.
second to.
The motion
waive the
introduced,
second
is that what we
and
got?
third
We've
reading.
already
We
introduced
introduced
it.
it last time.
Yeah, we introduced it last time.
Motion to approve, right?
Yeah.
So you,
Roll call on the motion to waive.
Second.
Her head's gonna spin off.
You got it. Yeah, right, the magic stuff.
I'm just gonna pick from.
Yeah.
Okay, motion for the waivers first.
Yes.
Creachy.
Yes.
Nagel.
Yes.
Raffle.
Yes.
Ideas.
Yes.
Warford.
Yes.
Sweet.
Yes.
And then a vote on the final reading of ordinance 2417.
Creachy.
Yes.
Nagel.
Yes.
Sweet.
Yes.
Ideas.
Yes.
Warford.
Yes.
Raffle.
Yes.
And I did attend the county board meeting this morning, and this is on their agenda, not this subject, but they have found 2 locations northwest of Wahoo for the big tower. So they'll start working on those, and they feel they have 2 willing landowners. One prefers a lease, and the other prefers a sale. So they're weighing that out. So
And that's like a 300-foot tower out that way, isn't it? That was the one that was being discussed out
That's
on
the
the
big
dog
game.
park.
At
Right.
15th and
Right.
Lake.
To be a larger.
Okay. Number 5, declaration of surplus property.
So the items, yeah, this list of items are surplus.
Non-vehicle assistant.
Well, what does a $250 van look like?
You don't wanna look at it.
I don't think you want to tailgate with it.
You don't wanna buy it for the tires either.
those ice cream trucks that drive around?
I make a motion to approve declaring them a surplus.
I'll second it.
Okay. Any other discussion? Roll call.
Warford,
Yes.
Rappel,
Yes.
Nagel,
Yes.
Ideas.
Yes.
Sweet,
Yes.
Krejci.
Yes.
Okay, I have no other comments.
I can get 2 grand
Council
for that
members, do
projector.
you have any items that you want to bring up? We would not be able to take action if anything you want to bring up.
I have one thing I wanted to inform you. You recall last September, we had to participate in the joint public hearing at
Oh,
the school, right? Well, we got our bill for the mailing the postcards to all the individuals that were invited to attend the public hearing. And our share is only about $250, but countywide, the amount of money spent to send out those postcards was over $7,000. So
Will we have to do something similar again?
it's in law, yeah.
Yeah,
It
every
just
year.
depends
Is that every year?
Every year.
Okay.
It depends on our ask or our increase in our.
Right, and the only way that we wouldn't is if our ask was less than that,
Right.
less than the statutory requirement.
So with
which
that
is-
$7,000, were we paying a firm to do the mailing for us? Or were we doing that?
No, we didn't have any responsibility for mailing that out, that was all on the county. And NACO, which is the county statewide organization, facilitated that, because the county already sends out your change in valuation cards, so they had the
Database.
database, right, and the printer on board to go ahead and do that. But that's just one county in Nebraska,
I
right?
know.
Not every
Right.
county had to do that, not every taxing entity had to participate, but yeah,
Most did.
most
probably
did, yes.
Yeah.
Any other items from the council? See, you open your mouth, but nothing came out.
He's making a motion, I'll second it.
Make it adjourn.
Motion adjourned?
Motion adjourned.
Okay, made and seconded. All in favor, stand and leave the room.
Now we gotta put the room back.
Yeah, don't leave it around.